everyone. What we're doing today is calculating angles with transversals. It's actually just a continuation of yesterday, and if you were super solid on yesterday, you're going to be good to go today. But I want to just review some of the angle relationships, and I'm realizing, as I say this, that this is a terribly drawn line, so I'm going to redo that while I talk here. That's still pretty bad over here. Sorry. I've said this before, I'm a terrible artist. Okay, there we go. So we've got two parallel lines, we've got this transversal here, and what I want to talk about is which angles are congruent and which angles are supplementary to each other. Remember, congruent means they are equal to each other. Supplementary means when you add them together, you get 180 degrees. So, this angle right here, okay, and this corner, there are going to be three other angles that are congruent to it and four angles that are supplementary to it. Okay? The first one we know that is congruent is going to be this guy right here. We know that those two are going to be congruent because they're vertical angles. Opposite sides of this linear intersection right here are going to be congruent to each other. So we know that this is congruent. Another angle that we know is this angle right here. We know that angle is true because they're corresponding. We talked yesterday about how these angles and these angles are the same as long as we're in the same place. So this angle and this angle have to be congruent. Well, this angle, we know, is congruent to this angle because these two are vertical. And if this angle is congruent to this angle and this angle is congruent to this one, then all three of them are going to be congruent to each other. So these four angles will all be congruent to each other. Okay? This angle and this angle are our corresponding angles. These two are our alternate exterior. Remember, alternate means the opposite side of the transversal, and exterior means on the outside. So this angle to this angle are our alternate exterior angles. And here we have our alternate interior angles. Alternate exterior and alternate interior are always going to be congruent to each other. Let's work on our other pairs. Let's talk about this angle. Notice I'm drawing two arcs so that we don't confuse the congruencies here. Everything with one arc is congruent to each other. Everything with two arcs will be congruent to each other. Okay? So this guy will be congruent to this angle because they're vertical. Remember, opposite sides of an intersection. These two angles are congruent to each other. These two angles are congruent to each other. And then we've got the corresponding angles as well. And then these two are vertical. Something that's worth noting here is because these two lines are parallel, we only have two angle measurements in this whole thing. Okay? So everything is either congruent to something else or supplementary to something else. If we look just at this top intersection here, this whole piece, if we were to add both of these angles together, has to equal 180 degrees because it's a straight line. It's a linear angle. They're a linear pair. We also know that these two added together will have to be a linear pair, which makes sense. They're the same angle measurements. So what we see then is that if we are same side interior, so SS interior angles equal 180 degrees. We also see that same side exterior equal 180 degrees. So this angle and this angle, or this angle and this angle. These two angles are supplementary, as are these two angles. So same side will generally mean that they're supplementary, and alternate side is generally going to mean that we're going to be congruent. Be careful though, because if they're the exact same position, if there are corresponding angles, then they will be congruent. Don't confuse that with same side. Okay? If you're looking at a same side and you think it's a same side angle, but one's exterior, one's interior, it means it's corresponding. Okay? Those are the big things that I want to just remind you and cover today, that a lot of these congruencies you're going to want to be aware of. The other things that I just want to cover really quickly because you may need them. The homework is going to get pretty tricky. Okay? So if I'm looking at something that looks like this, and I say that this is a 50-degree angle, and I ask you to find the rest of them, remember, vertical angles should be the first one that you find. Because it's easy, there's no math. Then, notice that this is a line right here. So that has got to be 180. If the whole thing is 180, but 50 of it is already spoken for, then the remainder has to be 130. Now, there are a couple of different ways that you could find this last angle. The fastest and easiest is to just say, oh, well, this angle and this angle are the same. They're vertical angles, so this must be 130. The other way to think about it is, to say, oh, well, there's a line too. It's kind of an upside down line, but this has to be 180 as well. So 50 of it's spoken for, so that has to be 130 degrees. Okay? Keep in mind your vertical angles. Keep in mind your linear intersections. So if you have a line anywhere, and it can look like anything, maybe it'll be straight up and down or sideways, something like this, and I say that this is 36. I don't care that it's not a straight across flat line. This will still be 180 degrees. So then this needs to be 180 minus 36, 144. Okay? So keep those tricks in mind. Vertical angles are going to get you everywhere in this class. And then with those parallel lines, remember the top angles and the bottom angles. Those corresponding pieces, if they're in the same spot, those are congruents as well. Those two pieces of information will get you through just about the whole homework. There's actually not a lot new in these last couple of days. It's still linear intersections, and looking at a line, do I remember, oh yeah, that line is 180 degrees. What's left over? And also remembering vertical angles. Really quick, let me just give you one little example just because I'm not sure we've actually done it, this kind of a thing. Oh, yeah, we have. This is the same thing. Remember, this whole piece is 180. If I say this is 30 and this is 20, the whole thing is 180. So this last piece has to be 130 degrees because they have to add up to 180. This diagram is terrible. None of these degree measurements are equal. But remember, you may have to add up more than one angle to get the piece. And if half is 180, the whole thing is 360. I'm going to stop there so you can get the homework. Do not get discouraged. There are some tricky problems in there that you're going to have to spend some time thinking about. But that's kind of the goal right now is, can we figure out angle measurements? All right? I'll see you in class.